a bitterly divided land steeped in history, an ancient culture predating biblical times, a popular tourist destination famous for both white sand beaches and snow-capped mountains, a thriving member of the European Union whose economic strengths range from shipping to cheese-making, and quite possibly within a few years, lucrative gas exports as well. The Republic of Cyprus is all this and more. Half the size of Connecticut, this Mediterranean island sits at the confluence of Western Asia, Southern Europe and North Africa. Its distinctly Greek heritage has dominated Cypriot history for close to 2 millennia. Yet the military occupation of 37% of the island's land area by Turkish forces keeps Cyprus constantly in the news. Located in the eastern Mediterranean, close to the south of Turkey, west of Syria, Lebanon, Israel and north of Egypt, Cyprus has been fought over by the world's leading powers from the very beginning. While not a biblical land, Cypriot wine is specifically mentioned in the Old Testament, and some of its churches are linked with the travels of the disciple Paul. From ancient times until today, the island has been linked with the goddess of love and sexuality, Aphrodite. This female figure, venerated since the 4th millennium before Christ, was said to be born from the foam rising from the sea. Also known as Venus to the ancient Romans, she represents fertility in all its aspects. From the ox that cultivates the fields to the woman who carries new life in her womb.
Gradually, the Greeks, with their spirituality, they transformed this primitive goddess which was worshipped, which was associated with fertility, and this goddess became the goddess of love and the goddess of beauty. And it is this goddess that in the Western world is known and has been praised down to the present day. Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love. But she started as a goddess of sexual love, and as such she originated in the Near East. She came to Cyprus, and from Cyprus she was given to the Greeks, and from the Greeks she was given to the whole world. So Cyprus has played a pivotal role in the adoration of this great goddess Aphrodite.
Today, Aphrodite is the focus of tourist festivals in the town of Paphos, and she's still making news, thousands of years after her birth. Recently, the Cypriot government issued new biometric passports with Aphrodite's near-naked image on the cover. That infuriated conservatives and led some to worry that the scandalous passports might cause problems for the Cypriot citizens travelling to Muslim countries. In 2010, the Republic of Cyprus celebrated its 50th anniversary of independence with much fanfare. But Cyprus itself is a divided nation, and its picturesque capital Nicosia has the sad distinction of outlasting Jerusalem, Belfast, Beirut and Berlin for the title of the world's last divided city. From the observation deck of the Woolworth building, you can get a sweeping view of Nicosia and see pretty much where Free Cyprus ends and occupied Cyprus begins. Until 2008, downtown Ledra Street was actually barricaded in two, with barbed wire, machine guns and graffiti ringing a checkpoint manned by UN peacekeeping troops. On the Greek-speaking side, shops, cafes and boutiques sizzle with customers and life, while the Turkish side languishes in economic isolation. This sorry state of affairs is a consequence of the Turkish invasion of 1974. Hundreds of thousands of people were uprooted from their ancestral homes in the wake of Turkey's occupation. The result is a buffer zone between the two sides, and a never-ending stalemate that endures to this day. Few people know this story better than the Cypriot ambassador in Washington, Pavlos Anastasios.
Well, the buffer zone snakes throughout Cyprus. In Greek, we call it the dead zone. It used to be covered with groves, orange groves, and cultivation. Now, nothing is there. The orange groves have gone, no cultivation, and the houses and hotels have fallen apart.
The buffer divides the predominantly Greek-speaking government-controlled Republic of Cyprus from the Turkish-occupied part of Cyprus, which is recognized only by Turkey. For years, says the ambassador, it separated families, friends and communities.
In the city, the width of the buffer zone can be very few meters. If you go out in the fields, it can be as much as 4 kilometers. The important thing to note is that there is no feature that distinguishes the area that is under occupation and the government-controlled area. No mountains, no valleys, no rivers. It's simply where the Turkish invading forces stopped in 1974.
Ambassador Anastasios knows all too well. He's a native of Famagusta, a colourful city in eastern Cyprus that remains under Turkish military occupation. Famagusta used to be a thriving port and commercial centre, but now all the ambassador can do is gaze upon the city of his birth from a faraway lookout tower with longing. As painful as it is, the occupation of the northern Cyprus by 40,000 Turkish troops didn't stop Cyprus from applying for membership in the European Union, a long-awaited dream that finally came true on January the 1st, 2004.
This was the most positive event that happened in the history of Cyprus since independence in 1916. The objective was always for a united Cyprus to enter the European Union. Efforts towards that aim were undertaken, but unfortunately did not prove possible. In 2004, Cyprus entered the European Union. It was the whole of Cyprus that entered the European Union, including the part under occupation. However, because the government of Cyprus cannot exercise effective control over the occupied part, the application of the acquis, the European law, has been suspended until the Cyprus problem is resolved and Cyprus is reunified again.
With just less than 1 million inhabitants, Cyprus ranks as one of the smallest in the EU's 27 member states. In fact, only Luxembourg and Malta are smaller. Cyprus is clearly a service-based economy, and one of its most important industries is, of course, tourism. Because it's a former British colony, the United Kingdom remains the island's largest source of tourism. Last year, the UK accounted for 37% of the nearly 3.8 million tourists who visited Cyprus. Large numbers also visit from Russia, Greece, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Switzerland and Israel. Many young people come to enjoy its beaches and nightlife. Foreigners are also drawn to the island for its natural beauty, its natural parks and its culture. Cyprus is steeped in archaeological treasures literally everywhere you look, and it's also a natural tourist attraction for Christian pilgrims. As far back as the Middle Ages, the most devout Christians would travel to the Holy Land via Cyprus, making the rounds of the famous Greek Orthodox monasteries. Golf is another reason to come here, says Antonis Patsilidis, the country's Minister of Commerce, Industry and Tourism. And one of the best places to enjoy it is the Aphrodite Hills Resort Hotel, an intercontinental luxury hotel property with its 18-hole championship course located in Paphos, along the island's southwestern coast.
We have right now 4 18-hole golf courses. All of them are in Paphos and Limassol area. They are doing extremely well. We have another 4 under construction, and we have another 3 which will be receiving their licenses to start construction in the next few months. We believe that golf is a very important sector of the new touristic product which you want to present to new customers from America and other countries who we know very much that they love golf.
And for those who don't like golf, there's plenty of other things to see and do. Only 2 kilometres northwest of Paphos Harbour lies the Tombs of the Kings, an underground complex of tombs dating back as far as the 4th century BC. Despite its majestic name, not a single king is buried in this necropolis. However, it is the final resting place of about 100 noblemen and aristocrats who lived and died in Paphos. Some of them are carved into solid rock. Also in the Paphos area is the Paleo-Christian Basilica of Chrysopolitissa. According to the Bible, this is the place where the Apostle Paul was tied to a stone column and whipped. Perhaps it's no coincidence that Cyprus, the birthplace of Aphrodite, was also the first place to receive the message of Christianity. Perhaps that explains why Cyprus is home to so many churches and monasteries. Aphrodite's rock, by the way, marks the spot where the goddess was born. It's particularly beautiful at sunset and especially popular with tourists. Further up the coast is Lachi, also known as Latsi or Laki, depending on which map you're using. Named after the old Greek word for waterhole, this town was once a sleepy little fishing harbour. Although it's grown considerably over the years, Latchi still retains its charm. Here, you can choose from hiring a boat to explore the rugged coastline or relax on the beach. Or sample the best fresh fish in Cyprus, downed with a beer in one of the local taverns. Then enjoy a night at the town disco. Some of the island's most interesting tourist attractions also coincide with key Cypriot exports. One of the country's greatest industries is wine production, and one of the most impressive wineries in Cyprus is the Vouni Panayas operation, located in the village of Panaia near Paphos. Run by businessman Andreas Kyriakidis, this wine produces 500,000 bottles a year, up from only 10,000 bottles in 1987, its first year of operation. Nothing goes better with wine than cheese, and Cyprus is the home of the world-famous halloumi. Made from a mixture of unpasteurized goats and sheep's milk, traditional artisan halloumi dates back from the Byzantine period. This white, salty cheese has a very high melting point, meaning it's the only cheese you can grill, fry or bake without worrying about it melting. On a visit to Letimpu, a village with about 290 inhabitants near Paphos, is where we met Andreas and Sofia Kyriakou. This couple makes halloumi cheese twice a week and artisan bread 3 to 4 times a day. Another tradition that's every bit as Cypriot as wine and halloumi cheese is lefkaratika, the art of lace making. Lefkaratika comes from the appropriately named village of Lefkara, home to around 1,100 inhabitants. The village is nestled in the foothills of the Troodos Mountains south of Nicosia. For many generations, the lace-making tradition is passed down from mother to daughter. While these artisan traditions of wine and lace-making are certainly quaint and popular with visitors, the real money in Cyprus is generated by the island's burgeoning service sector, led by industries like banking, ship registration, maritime services, and most recently, IT and energy. Despite its small size, Cyprus ranks as one of the 10 most popular ship registrations in the world. Its main port, Limassol, is also a base of operations for ship management companies. In ancient times, Famagusta, the ambassador's hometown, was among the Mediterranean's busiest and wealthiest transshipment ports, thanks to its location along the trading routes linking the East with Europe. John Constantinou, a consultant based in Limassol, says ship owners set up their operations in Cyprus because here they pay tax on the tonnage of the vessels they manage rather than on the profits they make from operating the ships, and corporate taxes for most profits are taxed at a low rate. That makes Cyprus a much more attractive place to do business.
Currently, Cyprus has the lowest tax rate, corporate tax rate, in the whole of the European Union. This is at 10%, which means that all the profits of a company are taxed at 10%. If the shareholders of the company are non-resident in Cyprus, let's call them foreigners, then there's no withholding tax on the dividends either. So effectively, the effective rate for any company that sets up business here from abroad is that they pay a corporation tax rate of 10% as opposed to the rest of the European countries, which could be up to 50–52%.
Because of the British legal system that prevails here, investors can rest assured that they're operating in an environment that's safe for their investments. Not to mention the island's extremely high level of professional accounting and communication services.
Cyprus is a gateway to Europe for the very basic reason that it's a member of the European Union. So if we take the example of a Chinese company who might want to set up some sort of business in the European Union, they might, or they should, choose Cyprus as the place where to do business. One, because of the corporate tax rate, which, as we mentioned before, is only 10%. And secondly, because Cyprus is a member of the EU, and therefore they will enjoy the benefits out of operating out of an EU country.
Pastelidis, the country's former Minister of Commerce, Industry and Tourism, points out that 80% of the gross domestic product of Cyprus comes from services. These include financial, legal, accounting, consulting, educational and health-related services, as well as tourism, which alone constitutes 11% out of this 80% share. Tourism, which has several potentially lucrative subsectors. Manthos Mavramatis is president of the Cyprus Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which speaks for more than 9,000 member companies and comprises of 145 associations covering the whole range of economic activity.
Cyprus has a very good network of treaties for the avoidance of double taxation with those countries, and therefore it makes sense for international companies to invest in those countries via Cyprus.
Cyprus is also a reputable international business centre where foreign companies can establish themselves on the island as a base for operations throughout North Africa and the Middle East, especially in these times of turbulence and unrest in the Arab world. One multinational that's already done so is NCR Corp, an Ohio-based technology giant originally known as National Cash Register. In the mid-1980s, NCR moved its regional headquarters from Bahrain to Cyprus. It later became the first IT vendor to receive an ISO 9002 certification in Cyprus, from where it controls sales, marketing and service in a wide swath of territory stretching from Greece to Pakistan.
We have also a few cases of American companies conducting their regional businesses out of Cyprus. NCR is the best example that from their regional headquarters out of Cyprus, they control their operations in 55 countries. And we hope that this will be an example to be followed by other US multinationals.
What would transform the Cypriot economy even more would be a major discovery of offshore oil or gas. And that's got plenty of people here excited in the wake of similar recent discoveries in the Mediterranean off the coast of nearby Israel. It's interesting that Cyprus launched its first licensing round for hydrocarbons in 11 offshore blocks back in mid-2007. It did so despite objections from Turkey, which claims these concessions encroach on its continental shelf. Production is expected to begin in 2014. Noble Energy and its local partner have proposed creating a facility to process the hydrocarbons into liquefied natural gas, or LNG, says Ambassador Anastasios. Mavromatis, the Chamber of Commerce president, says a major offshore discovery of hydrocarbons would transform Cyprus from top to bottom and act as a catalyst for future economic development. Konstantinou agrees.
Well, if indeed Cyprus does find these large deposits of gas or oil that many are talking about, I suspect that out of necessity some companies will need to set up business here. Now, I envisage that there will be a peripheral company setting up in order to service the major companies that will exploit these deposits. So I do expect that there will be, let's say, an influx of companies in this specific sector, which will of course help the economy of Cyprus tremendously.
The warm relations Cyprus now enjoys with Israel are balanced by the country's historically close ties to the Arab world. Unfortunately, close ties would not be a word used to describe the current state of affairs between Cyprus and Turkey. That, of course, is a consequence of the occupation, now in its 37th year. In fact, says the ambassador, there's no area anywhere in Cyprus that was predominantly Turkish before the occupation. Wherever you looked, he said, you'd find the Greeks were the majority. But that changed after 1974, when large numbers of Turks moved to occupied northern Cyprus, lured by government incentives. Miletis Apostolidis knows about that. The 61-year-old architect says he can still recall the scent of the lemon trees that grew behind his house in the town of Lapithos, home to his Apostolidis family for generations. In 1974, advancing Turkish troops uprooted the young man, who was 24 at the time, along with 170,000 other Greek Cypriots, in what suddenly became Turkish-occupied northern Cyprus. The only thing his mother Andriani managed to take were her prized threads and embroideries. Left behind were photo albums, family mementos, and of course, the family home and its beloved citrus orchards.
This is how I remember how it was for most of the people, that village and their homes. People lost them. They lost their homes. They are uprooted in some way. So thinking of the home, thinking of my village is thinking really is part of your personality, it's part of your upbringing, is your whole being in a sense. And wanting to reunite is really an attempt to reunite yourself, to find peace with yourself. To be able to flourish, you need your roots.
The world might not have ever heard of Apostolidis if not for a visit he made in 2003 to his village, located about 15 kilometers west of Kyrenia. In a sort of irony, that visit was inspired by a Turkish Cypriot colleague of his who had just visited his own boyhood home in Limassol, thanks to the newly opened borders. Apostolidis said that when the Greek-speaking Cypriots opened the door, his Turkish-speaking friend produced a framed picture from his backpack and told the occupants that he had finally fulfilled his parents' wish to return home. The Greek Cypriots immediately put that picture on their mantelpiece. But when Apostolidis returned to his house in 2003, for the first time since the Turkish invasion, he found a British expatriate couple living there and a woman happily watering the plants in her garden. After a testy confrontation with the woman, he immediately decided to sue the property's occupants. A Nicosia court sided with him, and even though a British court opposed that ruling, eventually the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg ruled that the property had to be returned to Apostolidis. That sent shockwaves throughout Cyprus and the EU and infuriated the 6,000 or so Britons who have snatched up properties at bargain prices in a self-styled republic recognised only by Ankara.
The decision from there was clear, and back into the appeal, the decision was implemented. And of course, the decision was to implement the decision of the Cyprus court, which was to give back the property, remove whatever was put on the property, and pay the compensation for the use of the land and the expenses of all these procedures. There are a lot of other court cases following that, which I think changed a bit this kind of picture. But the fact that the people felt that they could do something practical as well, it was very important. It's a free place, a free country if you like, and a decision could be whatever. But if they want to go and live in their homes, they should not be denied this fact.
Giorgio Iacovo, who served as Foreign Minister of Cyprus longer than anyone else and is now the country's Minister of the Presidency, admitted that perhaps he's being a little optimistic when he says that the perennial Cyprus problem must be resolved in the next few months. But that's exactly what needs to happen, he said, considering that Cyprus will assume the rotating presidency of the European Union from July the 1st to December the 31st of 2012.
We have to resolve it taking the Turkish Cypriots along with us into the presidency of the Union. Otherwise, de facto, it will not be possible to be making major changes in the administration of the country, because we will be becoming a federal state, which means changing the nature of the administration from a unitary state to a federal state, and therefore that means we'll have to wait the following year. In the following year we have presidential elections early in 2013, in the middle of February, which means that there will be no solution until June 2013. So now is the time to find a solution to the Cyprus problem.
But Iacovo doesn't advocate a settlement with Turkey at any price.
It is really to persuade Turkey to abandon what we consider either a partitionist concept for the solution of the Cyprus problem, or at best a confederal approach. This partition and confederation are not acceptable to the Greek Cypriots. The Greek Cypriots are committed to one single sovereignty, single international personality, and single citizenship. If it doesn't conform to that, it's not acceptable to the Greek Cypriots. Therefore, our friends must attempt to persuade Turkey not to deviate from this model that we are trying to create, and they must abandon some of their more outlandish proposals that cut across the idea of the federation, and they are either partitionist or confederalist.
If a solution to this perennial conflict can actually be negotiated, Mavromatis says it'll be great for the Cypriot economy, even more important than the discovery of offshore oil or gas.
For real estate development, I believe it will be a bonus, because very many foreigners, especially Europeans, who would like to buy a summer house in the Mediterranean, are a little bit deterred to do so in Cyprus by the existence of a political problem and all the political considerations and uncertainties associated with it. So the removal of all political uncertainties will encourage them to buy a summer house on this lovely island.
Pastelidis says now that people can walk freely from the Greek-speaking part of Cyprus to the Turkish-speaking part and vice versa, there's been lots of interaction between the two communities. Greek Cypriots want to see the northern part of the island because it's where they were born and raised, even though their homes are now occupied by either settlers or Turkish Cypriots. They also go shopping there because many goods are cheaper. And lots of Turkish Cypriots cross into the southern part of the island because of job opportunities. The salaries are much higher than in the occupied parts of Cyprus.
We made mistakes, they made mistakes. This is not, and we forgive each other. Let's hope that the Turkish military and the Turkish government soon, rather than later, realize that it is to their benefit as well to act in a positive way and find a solution.
In the end, that's pretty much what all Cypriots pray for, regardless of their religion, language or ethnic background.
Well, I hope for a resolution of the Cyprus problem as soon as possible so that all people can share in this new prosperity. Cyprus is far too small to be divided. At the same time, is large enough to be the common home of both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, but without occupation.